Here's something I learned the hard way. It's possible to cut ties with someone and still feel miserable. And it's also possible to stay in a relationship with them, yet feel completely free. Let me say that again. You can walk away and still feel miserable, or stay and feel completely at peace. So maybe the real question isn't should you cut them off, but instead, how can you feel free? Let me tell you a story. I used to ask myself this question again and again. See, there was someone in my life that brought me a lot of stress. And I don't mean the occasional disagreement. I mean deep emotional tension. Even when they weren't around, just the thought of them calling would stress me out. I'd worry about what they might call and say or ask for. Then one day, something big happened. I couldn't believe that they would do something like that to me. It just felt evil. And I decided that's it. I'm done. I cut contact completely for almost a year. And while that brought some relief, it didn't bring peace. Because even though I wasn't speaking to them, my mind would still think about them. I'd wonder if they might call. And I'd feel the same anxiety in my body, just from the possibility of hearing from them. It's something called fear of fear. You're afraid that something is going to happen, even though it never does. And you live with this subtle sense of fear, just waiting. That might happen. Maybe you can relate to this. So anyway, that's when I realized that cutting them off doesn't really solve my problem. Luckily for me, around that time, I had the incredible opportunity of meeting the Dalai Lama. And shortly after, finding my teacher, Mingyur Rinpoche. I got to meet these icons of compassion and experience what, their years of dedicated practice actually feels like. In their presence, I felt this overpowering yet comforting feeling of love, of spaciousness, and pure presence. And inspired by them, I began training my mind in these stages of compassion meditation, which includes meditating on the difficult or the toxic person in our life. And at first, it was really difficult because even the thought of this difficult person would bring up lots of, negative emotions, negative thoughts, right? But slowly, week after week, things began to shift. As I began to put myself in their shoes and look at life from this difficult person's lens, I began to see that actually they're not that evil. In fact, they are very much like me. They want to be happy and they don't want problems in their life. I started to see that what I actually saw as their harmful behavior was actually coming from their pain. And they weren't really a bad or toxic person. As I began to understand them, I softened toward them. So after about a year, we spoke again. And this time, it was different. For one, I wasn't the same person from a year ago. I was more relaxed and more open. And if anything, I felt a bit warm toward them. So in our conversation, I told them that whatever our differences were, I'm happy to let them go. The truth is that I do care about you. And life is short. And if we want, it really can be simple. So let's keep talking and stay in touch, okay? Now, I wasn't expecting much, but to my surprise, they also softened toward me in the conversation. They also spoke with warmth and we had a few laughs. Basically, a new tone was set for the relationship. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, so what next? Did that mean that I'm willing to go back to how things were? or I'm willing to go back to being treated unfairly. Absolutely not. Compassion does not mean being a doormat. I learned that compassion is seeing that even when they act in harmful ways, it's not personal. It's just coming from their own pain. And when I realized this, I just wasn't affected anymore, right? Like, I can still love them, even though they act in ways that others may perceive as selfish. And this is what true freedom is, right? That when we can feel love in our heart, regardless of how somebody else acts or behaves toward us, when we're able to see them as just, a little child who who doesn't know any better. So I realized that compassion doesn't mean that we have to tolerate bad behavior. No, we can absolutely, keep distance or have boundaries, right? But the difference is that this time, unlike what I did before, it wasn't coming from a place of resentment and hatred, right? It's coming from clarity. It's coming from clarity. That's the key difference. So in essence, we feel free. Do you see what I mean, right? So this comes back to our original question, that should you cut ties with your toxic person, right? And you can see now that the real question isn't should you cut ties, but how can you feel free from the difficult emotions, which is what you don't want to feel, right? Because once you're free, then you can act from a place of clarity, not from a place of fear or hatred. And that's awesome. It's beautiful. So in my experience, this is what's possible from doing the inner work, okay? Now, what I want to do is I want to leave you with this reflection so that you can answer your own question about whether you should cut ties with your toxic person or not. Imagine you are a flame and the toxic person is the wind. Okay, so you're a flame and the toxic person in your life is the wind. When a flame is weak compared to the wind, when the wind is stronger, it will always destroy the flame, right? So this means that if you get triggered around this person, if they bring up fear or anxiety or anger in you, then it's probably a good idea to have some distance, to stay away if you can. But not for the sake of staying away, for the sake of doing the inner work, right? Freeing yourself, becoming more open, more compassionate, more understanding, right? Brightening and increasing the flame that is you. And actually, this is your natural state, right? Your natural state is loving and compassionate and understanding. When, as a flame, you become stronger than the wind, then you can be where the wind is. It doesn't really matter. But it also doesn't mean that you have to. So a simple question to ask yourself right now is, are you stronger than the wind at the moment? Or not yet? And if the answer is not yet, that's totally okay. It just means that maybe a good idea to stay away and do the inner work. Okay? I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.